It's Andy and Nora's podcast.
Hey, Nora.
Hey, Sandy.
What's going on? Are you surviving the heat wave that I've heard has just trounced your side of North America this week?
It was brutal. It was 3 days of total hell, and
Oh my
I don't
God.
have air conditioning, and it was really, really, really bad.
Yeah.
It's over. Now we've got 50 millimeters of rain falling, and I played soccer in that yesterday, and it was so much rain that it literally felt like I was in the shower. Like, that's how much rain was hitting my face while we were playing. And our ref was this kid who was couldn't have been older than 20. Sorry, I know you're not kids, but you kind of are still. And it's weird. They don't usually have young people ref these matches because you're dealing with men, and the men get angry and then they'll try to fight you. So most of the refs are either in their 40s or in their 60s. Anyway, this guy couldn't call the game and he was getting so mad. And we were just like, end the game, man. You're in charge. You can just end the game if you think this is too much rain. And he's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And he just walks off the field. And I was like,
What?
Okay, well, that was silly. So I'm great. I'm covered in mosquito bites as well, which is really irritating. And so everything is itchy. But that's summer. It is summer. The solstice has come and gone already, and the days are getting shorter. So that was a long answer to your question.
It was a long answer to my question, but I'm glad to hear you survived that terrible heat wave. Of course, that is something that is a big issue with respect to survival, the way that the heat waves are getting worse and worse. So, the climate crisis, my friends, it's not good. I'm currently in Toronto recording this, and as I was leaving LA, we had a heat advisory as well, that it was too hot, and at the same time, the oceans are too cold to swim in for more than 20 minutes advisory. I was just like, what's happening?
What?
I don't know if this is regular. I'm not sure. I'm not from an ocean residing place, but yeah, there was 2 advisories popped up on my phone as alerts. One was that it's too hot today, and the other was that it's too cold in the water. Don't swim for more than 20 minutes because you could get hypothermia.
Okay. That seems really strange, but I mean, a cold ocean seems good, at least.
I guess I don't know what what leads to an announcement like that being put out. So I'm just like, what does this mean? What does it all mean? I'm not sure, Nora, but it doesn't feel good.
Oh, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. But you know what, Sandy, what feels good?
Us talking on this podcast.
Yes, that feels great. But no, I wasn't going to say that. Have I told you, I'm sure I've mentioned to you that I've been involved with a group of people trying to get a family from Gaza to Canada?
Yes, you have told me that. And I did see that you had some updates this week.
Oh my God, yes. They are, as we're recording, they are literally in the descent into Toronto Pearson Airport. And while,
oh my God.
Fingers crossed, everything goes well in customs and immigration, as it should. They're coming to Quebec City as of tonight. And so we're going to be at the airport and able to welcome its 5 kids and their mom, who is my friend's wife, and children. And it just feels amazing and unbelievably enraging that it's taken even this long to get this family to Canada. I'm just I can't believe it. I can't believe the day is here. And it feels really exciting, and it's also very sad. And my heart goes out to everyone else trying to get family and friends from Gaza to Canada, knowing how absolutely difficult the federal government has made the process.
Yeah, I'm really, really happy to hear that. And I just wish that more people had the opportunity to get to safety at this point. And, but beyond that, even more, I wish that none of this was necessary. And, I hope that the organizing efforts that are ongoing Again, I think they're having impact. It was really interesting to watch online some of the reporting from the court appearance on the injunction at the University of Toronto that was held this week for the injunction that the university filed against the encampment protesters. And so I'm, hopeful that that the decision of the court comes out on the right side, but we shall see. And of course, I'm really hopeful that the organizing around the world results in the stoppage that we need to see. Because I'm not that hopeful on the Canadian government doing what needs to happen, given our terrible track record on international affairs. But I'm probably getting ahead of myself here. Maybe we should just be grateful a little bit before we jump into that quagmire.
Yes, we have some gratitude to give out this week. Thank you so much to everyone who shared the podcast, who told other people to listen to it, who got us, 5 or 10 or 1.5 new fans. And especially thanks to folks who changed their donation or donated for the first time to the podcast. Especially thank you this week to Tyler. We have one person to thank, and it's Tyler. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Tyler. All right. So, Nora, I know that you know what I was referring to when I said that our track record on international affairs is terrible. I could have been talking about a whole number of things, but in particular, I was talking about some moves that our country made this week to expand the list of organizations that we call terrorists to include the Islamic Revolutionary Guard.
Yeah, which is, for the uninitiated, a branch of the Iranian army.
Now, what are the implications of that we are naming an actual a branch of government from another country a terrorist group?
Yeah, it's not something that happens very often, probably because you can imagine how weird things become when you officially designate an official branch of that country as a terrorist entity. And because it isn't normal to actually do that, it's why it has never been done in Canada. But ever since the Ukrainian Airlines plane was downed by accident by the Revolutionary Guard, the victims' families have been pushing the Canadian government to name the Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist entity. And there's been also a push from the United States that's been trying to get Canada to do the same. Now, the United States has completely isolated Iran. They've put sanctions on Iran. You'll remember that the Iranian sanctions are what got Meng Wanzhou caught up in legal proceedings in Canada from Huawei. And it's just part of the United States Cold War, simmering war with Iran. Canada has now enthusiastically jumped into the ring and declared the Revolutionary Corps as a terrorist entity. That will make having any diplomatic relations at all with Iran extremely impossible. I mean, they're already very, very terrible as it was. Canada doesn't have any embassy presence in Iran. The embassies that Iranians have to go to are all in neighboring countries. Folks will remember that our not active embassy in Syria was bombed by the Israelis in an airstrike against the Iranian embassy. And of course, Canada's just like, you take it all, Daddy Israel. You can kill the whole thing. It's fine. Just burn it to the ground. We support you. And so the announcement happened last week that finally we're going to do this, name this military as a terrorist entity. And it places a lot of people in Canada into jeopardy because Iran has conscription. And so when a citizen is compelled to fight in a military because there's conscription, does that mean they support the now declared terrorist entity? Like what exactly kind of legal implications? What are the legal implications for especially international students in Canada? And, I know many Iranian international students who will now, if they have any tie to the Iranian military, can be said to be supporting a terrorist entity. And it also gets complicated because there's other things that you can't do as a result of it being a terrorist entity. Anything like as if you look like you support it, or if you look like you're fundraising for it, or anything like that. And sometimes those cases are going to be like kind of obvious, like shouldn't fundraise for a foreign military. But of course, if it's Israel's, then that's fine. But other times it's going to be probably pretty complicated because Iran's military is really involved in Iranian society in general. So it just seems like a brazen attack on Iran in general. And unsurprisingly, in retaliation, the Iranian government has declared the Canadian military a terrorist organization. So doesn't really seem very good in this tit-for-tat war.
No, not at all. And it's just of all of the things that the Canadian government could be doing right now on a global scale, it does feel like a strange choice, unless considering what might be happening locally and how they think that will impact things locally. And so when you see that the United States, also named the IRGC a terrorist group in 2019 and has been pressuring Canada to do so, and Canada does whatever the U.S. wants, and the ongoing and growing issues with respect to how Israel is carrying out a genocide and threatening other states surrounding it. It's like, okay, this is part of how we are, organizing the world prior to the escalation of war in the Middle East.
Yeah, and I mentioned this briefly already, but like the way that Canada interacts with Iran as it relates to Israel is really, really messed up. Like, Iran has their embassies bombed by Israel in Syria, and Iran retaliates by shooting rockets towards Israel. No one is killed in those rocket attacks at all. It seemed like Iran was just sending a message to the United States being like, don't fucking bomb our embassies. And Canada sanctioned military leadership from Iran for daring to shoot missiles towards Israel. Like, we have a country that has been very, very quiet in how it supports Israel, and pointing out to the ways that it supports Israel has been a bit difficult. We've had to rely, mostly on military exports and imports as like the proxy measure for our support for Israel. But the support is as strong as basically the United States' support, other than we just don't have the kind of financial backing to be able to send that kind of money to Israel that the United States has. But morally, and certainly on the world stage, we're all in for Israel. And to see Canada interact with Iran like this, while like between Israel and Iran, who's doing the genocide right now? Who's doing the murdering? Who's maiming children? Who's destroying people's lives? Who's destroying infrastructure and hospitals and universities and groundwater systems and destabilizing the country? It's Israel. Obviously, it's Israel. And so it's like the politics become very brazenly obvious when you see it through that lens. And then there's also like a local angle too. And this was mentioned by Thomas Mulcair, who still is a political analyst for, I don't know if it's LCN or Radio-Canada, I forget, but in French. And he was wondering aloud how much this had to do with the Liberals trying to win a by-election in Toronto, where sanctioning the Iranian government and the Iranian military will play very well in the riding of St. Paul's, which some are saying the Liberals might lose for the first time in a million years or maybe ever. I don't think that the Conservatives have a hope in hell of winning that riding, frankly. But it is a riding where there's a very strong Zionist presence. And to continuously sanction Iran while Israel is literally doing genocide does seem to be a bit of a strange moment, considering that there is an election underway.
Mm-hmm. So in addition to the way that Canada is engaged in its international affairs, I wanted to also talk a little bit today in the way that Canada is engaged with temporary foreign workers. I don't know if you've seen this, Nora, but there's some new numbers out as to Canada's use of temporary foreign workers. And I have to admit, it's been a while since I did a deep dive into the program. But I was surprised at some of the numbers, and just how brazenly Canada continues to use the system and increasingly rely on it, given how much criticism of this program there's been consistently over the years. So you want to hear some interesting statistics?
Of course, always.
So I was pretty stunned to see the types of jobs have expanded that are on the list for people being able to use temporary foreign workers. And there's a way that there's companies have to prove that there's labor market shortages and there's no Canadians available for the kind of work that they are hiring temporary foreign workers for. And then, of course, I'm sure that there's ways that that can be massaged to make it look as though there are no Canadians available, so that these companies can go ahead and hire people who have less rights in Canada, and their whole lives in Canada are tied specifically to their employer. And one of the things I was really stunned to see on the list was administrative assistants. I was like, administrative assistants? What does that really mean? Yeah. And not only is administrative assistants on the list, but those administrative assistants in 2018, which was the last time we this is the article that I'm reading is a trend article. So in 2018, there were 287 administrative assistants in Canada on the temporary foreign worker program. Do you know how many there are as of the last numbers in 2023?
I'm going to assume much higher, but I don't know.
It's much higher. It's a 1,063% increase. Maybe you thought I was going to say that.
Oh my God, I thought you were just going to say a number.
No, percent. Whoa. Yeah, it's 3,337.
Wow.
The place that saw the most increase was nursing aides, orderly, and patient service associates, which, I mean, given what's happening in our healthcare sector and all the shortages we have in our healthcare sector across the board in Canada, it was a 15,000% increase.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Overall, Canada went from relying on just over 100,000 temporary foreign workers in 2018 to now relying on over 230,000 temporary foreign workers in the country. And this comes right after, I think it was in December of last year, there was the UN Special Rapporteur on modern forms of slavery commented on Canada's temporary foreign worker program, stating that some of the appalling conditions that people find themselves in and the ways in which they kind of have to submit entirely to an employer who has the ability to just tell them to do whatever they want, or they can effectuate their deportation, results in a level of control and a loss of rights in one's life that is potentially a modern form of slavery. And there will be a report coming out this year by the Special Rapporteur about Canada's temporary foreign worker program. What do you think of all that, Nora?
Well, while you were talking, I was thinking about how there was a special envoy that came from Jamaica to Canada to specifically inspect the farm conditions of temporary foreign workers that came from Jamaica. Mm-hmm. And first of all, it barely got any recognition in Canadian news, almost nothing at all, which is just so typical because, fucking the French prime minister comes and we hear about that, but we don't hear about the Jamaican labor minister and other senior officials coming to actually investigate and potentially accuse Canada of this modern day slavery program. And they did, and they were appalled by the working conditions that they saw in the Southern Ontario farms that they visited. It's so typical of Canada. I mean, this is the thing is like even our controversies are boring because you're like, oh my God, of course Canada does this. This is all we know how to do is exploitation, like in overdrive. But like there are so many domestic ways to fix some of the problems that we have within our labor market, especially when it comes to highly specialized programs like healthcare, aides and assistants and nurses and then doctors. And then there's other ways to, boost kind of even the traditional areas that rely on temporary foreign workers like pilots. That's a classic one where Canada's like, we're not training enough pilots. We need to poach pilots from around the world. And in all of those jobs, like the barrier to becoming a nurse or a doctor or a pilot or whatever is a tuition fee. Like we keep going back to this. It's like, this is what happens when you have absolutely no planning of your economy, that there's literally no attempt by government to plan our economy and make sure that people are given the opportunity and the money to go into the jobs that they want to go into and then see where the pieces lie after that and see where the shortages might be. But we artificially stop and limit people from going into certain kinds of work and then go, oh my God, we have to just find people from other countries. And then worse than that, we don't actually give them a path to immigration. We don't give them the access to anything stable. They don't come to Canada and then start working in a field that they can imagine themselves working for in the next 10 or 20 years because it's completely temporary. And so they're then forced to live between two countries, always afraid that at one point they're going to have to leave their current situation to go back home if the government's policy changes. It's such a crisis. And that combined with the international student crisis, combined with how many refugees that Canada accepted specifically from Ukraine, has just created this huge number of people in Canada with non-regular status and therefore non-regular access to services, help, and the political democratic decision-making structures, as in they can't vote. I mean, what an amazing mess this country has created for itself.
Yeah, entirely. And regardless of like all of the policy minutia, like if you just zoom out and like take a look at the program and you're just like a temporary foreign worker program in which the majority of the temporary foreign workers are approved to come here on a low wage status. Like what is this, like, how else could you think about a program like this except for like a disrespect for people who come from particular places? And of course, a lot of our temporary foreign workers are coming from places like the Caribbean, South America, the Philippines, a disrespect. I was like, of course, these folks will come here and work for wages that we would not offer Canadians, and we won't give them any rights. Like what does that spell besides a clearly institutionalized form of racism? I really don't know. There's no reason. There is no other reason why one would organize things this way. Now, I know folks might look at that and say, well, it's cheaper, it's whatever. It's like all of that, sure. But on the face of it, if you're zooming out, why do these people deserve to be treated more cheaply? It's because that's the way that Canada sees its workforce participation from people from these countries. And that's abhorrent. It's disgusting. And it should not be continuing. And then it's like, we've talked about this before, I'm sure. I can't remember us talking about it recently though. So here we go. Just looking at what this country needs and seeing like some of the discussion that happens in the media of people kind of like circling themselves, trying to figure out like, why are we having, such, such shortages in healthcare, and like, what can we do? And it's literally like, have we asked the question, how do you get involved in healthcare? Like, what is the pathway to getting there? And never, ever, ever hearing discussions about education or education system and how we pay people. The other thing just to mention about this is that the temporary foreign worker program, when it was started back in the 60s, up until today, even the government kind of talks about it this way, is that the government is like that this is like a temporary fix. This is a temporary fix in the Canadian economy where we have some shortages of Canadian workers. We're just going to do like have a few people come here that we'll rely on just a little bit to make sure that we are providing the right amount of food for Canadians, that we are making sure that the labor that we need is provided until we can get people in Canada working in those positions again. What is the point at which we actually stop relying on this akin to slavery program? Because, in fact, the opposite has happened. We've become more reliant on this program. And I mean, a way to become less reliant on the program is to give people who are seeking permanent residency here through these programs their permanent residency, and then they wouldn't be temporary workers anymore for those who want that. But that's not something that's an easy path. So at what point do we actually, does the temporary part of these programs kick in? And not like on an individual basis, but on the collective basis of Canada has always said that these programs were meant to be temporary fixes.
But that's always the language, isn't it? It's like, oh, we just need this and we'll fix that. We just need to get through this and we can start working on whatever. And it's like the temporary foreign worker program was not brought in to fix labor shortages only. The main reason it was brought in the 1960s, and you know this, of course, Sandy, is that it was trying to stop people from immigrating to Canada from countries that Canada wanted to keep out. It was specifically to make sure that Black Caribbean immigrants did not come to Canada to work and settle. And like that racism has always been at the core of this program. And it's just kind of like useful to have said it was temporary, obviously, as it continues to expand and expand and expand. And it like sends so many signals to Canadians about who is worthy and who is not worthy in this society, who is worthy of security and long-term planning, like allowing them to have long-term planning and long-term stability in Canada if they choose, or to leave if they'd like to choose, just robbing hundreds and thousands of people of that right. It's a right to feel secure in the country in which you live. What I'm most just so fascinated by in this program is that Canada, through the temporary foreign worker program, outsources its immigration planning to the private sector. Canada does not plan immigration patterns, how many, who, for where they going to settle, what parts of Canada have a population decline and need to have more people sent there or encouraged to go there or whatever. There's literally no planning when you say, okay, well, here are the permits and Tim Hortons can fight for some over here and this doctor's office can fight for some over there and this meatpacking facility can fight for some over there. And you're going to create little pockets of communities all over Canada, the way that immigration always creates pockets of communities all over Canada, except they are clustered around the will of an employer and not the will of government to actually plan something. And when you consider that alongside the fact that the federal government has outsourced its immigration planning to McKinsey, a private for-profit corporation that's not even Canadian, this is just part of the domination over Canadian policy and planning of the corporate world, of corporate rule. And of course, in that situation, corporations are going to be picking the cheapest jobs, the easiest people to get. Of course, they're going to make claims like, oh my God, there's a labor shortage of of administrative workers. It's like, if anybody's hired anybody for administrative work right now, you know that there is no shortage of people that want to work in those jobs. Like those jobs, you can get hundreds of applications pretty easily, especially if you pay well. But there's the issue is they don't actually want to have to pay anybody well. They don't actually want to have to be responsible for a Canadian, and because that comes with other responsibilities. And it's much easier if they just put the hiring sign to the world and just accept someone who will be basically at their total control. And yes, the program has gone through some changes, and yes, workers are now able to change their employer, but they have to stay in the same industry under which they were hired. But even all of these little traps that Canada has set for these workers continue to remove their agency and remove their rights in a way that just does not exist if we're talking about a Canadian or even a permanent resident of this country.
Yeah, and I mean, pair that with some of the experiences that people are having trying to get jobs in Canada who have been here their whole lives, or have finished school and perhaps have like a massive debt that they've taken on and are trying to find a job. And it's like, who's at the wheel here? Who is like trying to figure this stuff out? Because at the same time that's happening, we're hearing reports, of a higher unemployment rate in large cities like Toronto, and people having the experience of like literally, you get an undergraduate degree in some cases. You need an undergraduate degree in some cases to be something like an administrative assistant. And then people are submitting hundreds of job applications and not hearing back. And it's like, who's at the wheel? Like, who is trying to figure this stuff out? We're hearing more and more about how desperate people are feeling in their lives, about the untraditional nature of jobs now, of people trying to piece together a number of different gigs to try to make things work, having their side hustles to try to make things work. And people are really, really feeling squeezed. And that is happening at the same time as this temporary foreign worker program reliance is expanding. It just spells a whole lot of exploitation for workers across the board.
Yeah, and the implications and the impact that it has on the broader labor market are enormous. So on top of the fact that this is a downward pressure on wages, it puts downward pressure on wages. It also gives corporate Canada more expectation of control and coercion over their workers, which then also, of course, impacts how they treat Canadian workers. This is a whole group of people that are mostly finding themselves outside of the labor movement. Of course, there's some labor involvement, especially around farm workers and this kind of thing, organizing farm workers. But by and large, these are not unionized positions. And even if they are unionized, their status is so precarious that workers are not necessarily going to fight for their rights in the same way that they would if they're Canadian. And it has massive implications. The program has massive implications on the housing market. And obviously, when you have 200,000 people coming into Canada each year to work temporarily, that is going to have a very unique pressure on cheap temporary housing, like rental housing, because no one is purchasing a house if they're only going to be in Canada for the years that their contract dictates that they will be here for, because it's too unstable and they're probably not making enough money. And how are they going to get a mortgage and all of these kinds of questions? It's so enraging. And then when you look at it up close, when you see someone who is working in a job that Canada cannot actually fill, and I'm talking now of someone who I know, in a job that is really, really, really specific to a sport, okay? And that person exhausts all of their ability to try and stay in Canada to continue to work this very specific job, despite the total support of his employer and the total support of the community around him, and he's still deported. Just something I've seen in the last 2 weeks. It makes you want to put your fist through the wall. I mean, I think I don't actually I've never really felt the urge to punch stuff. That's not really how I get angry, but I know people do feel like that. So I'll use that term for those of you who understand it. It's enraging. And again, it's like, who are these people? It's not the Australians who work ski lifts in Western Canada. It's not Americans. It's not people coming from France or from Britain. It's people coming from Senegal and Cote d'Ivoire and I mean, now I'm showing my Quebec bias, and Algeria and countries that speak French. No, it's countries where people aren't white. It's countries where people are black and where people are brown, and that racism again asserts itself over and over and over and over in our systems. It's so enraging, and especially as we stare down a federal government where we're like, well, what's the difference between the liberals and the conservatives? And there are some differences between the liberals and conservatives. By and large, on the stuff that matters, there is no difference. There is literally no difference because our government is wholly under the control of the corporate world, 100% under the control of the corporate world. And it's not going to be an election that changes that. It's organizing that is going to be the only thing that changes that.
As you say this, like when I was in Banff a couple of weeks ago, I was like, why does everybody here have an Australian accent? Like, what is going on? To the point where I literally, I asked somebody at a restaurant, and I was like, sorry, I just noticed that so many people here have an Australian accent. What's going on? She said to me, well, it's really, really easy in Australia to get a 2-year workers permit for Canada, and we like extreme sports and we don't like the heat. So we come to Canada to work on a ski lift or something. And if you're like me, when I came 10 years ago, I was like, why would I leave this gorgeous place? And I just stayed. And I was like, wow, that's kind of amazing, right? Like the movement of people and people being able to live where they want, where they feel good and whatever. But the casualness with how easy it is for some folks, so casual. I just, that is not a reality for many people to be able to say that. And clearly for many people from countries in which the experience might actually be looking for work, finding someone who promises you that they're like an agent, and they, look all over the world for great placements in amazing countries like the United States and Canada. And this can be your opportunity to get your family out of poverty. And you'll go to Canada and you'll work, and you've heard wonderful things about Canada, haven't you? You just have to pay me this much. Don't worry, I know you don't have the money right now, but once you get to Canada and you start making money, you'll owe me that money. And there's a certain level of debt peonage that a lot of people who come on a temporary foreign worker program are subject to, that is a part of this that we don't often talk about and don't know about. And I feel like the Canadian government should take some responsibility for as well in making these workers totally at the whims of their employers, right? And not having some sort of relationship with the workers directly where the workers can assert their rights. They're leaving them open to exploitation, not just from their employers, but from people who are essentially involved in human trafficking and are able to even more exploit people because of the desperation that is caused by some of Canada's and the United States' economic participation overseas on a broader level. And it is really frustrating when you think about it that so much of our rights to have a decision on the ways that the place in which we live runs is based on this really weird concept of citizenship, where yes, I can create a temporary program in the 60s that's literally meant to make sure that there will be a second class of people who live here that won't have an ability to change the way that the system functions to their benefit. And that doesn't make any sense. It's an institutional form of racism and absolutely is akin to enslavement.
Well, it doesn't make any sense from average person's perspective, especially as we understand how democracy is supposed to work. But it 100% makes sense if you're trying to depoliticize and defranchise a general population, because the more people in that population who are officially disenfranchised, the more people that spreads. There's contact that people have with one another, and the complete a lack of power that people have within society gets worse when that society has more and more people who have a complete lack of power. Like, the more people who live in Canada who are disenfranchised from the political system, who are not allowed to vote, who are not allowed to have any kind of official say on municipal or provincial or federal politics, the more that disenfranchisement spreads. And there's other ways that Canadians who can vote are being disenfranchised, but it's all part of a general program to suppress political involvement and political participation in activity. You know, if we're talking about like foreign interference as being a problem in Canada, what is the flip side of foreign interference? It's Canada bringing people into Canada to work for Canadians who have no ability to be involved in Canadian politics and who are always, by definition, tied to another country and another country's politics and another country's political whims and political decision-making. Like, how many people come to Canada and get stuck here because of political things that happen back home that are completely out of their control, and then they become effectively stateless? How many people come to Canada under the prevailing conditions and expecting things to be the way that they are and staying the way they are, and then realizing that the world is unstable, things have changed, and then they have to make the decision, am I going to apply for asylum in Canada? Oh, but that would mean that I'd have to give up my passport and not potentially leave Canada for at least 4 years while I go through the process of getting asylum. And what happens if something changes back home and I can actually see my family at some point between now and the next 4 years from now? You know, we put people into absolutely abhorrent and impossible positions in this country. And it's all because Canada is just so stubbornly racist that we refuse to figure out new ways to deal within a global order where people are much more mobile than they've ever been. The number of internally and externally displaced people in the world today is higher than it has ever been, ever. And it's not just because there's more people. I mean, there's more people who are internally or externally displaced from where they are from than ever before. And the reason for that is the wars that fund Western capitalism. And we are implicated in that as Canadians. And at the same time, we refuse to do anything for the people who are caught in the crosshairs of what that entails. And so it's, it's enraging and infuriating. And if you want to get involved, you should look for migrant justice organizations who are doing work in your community. There's for sure a group or two or three that you can see if you can get involved with. But it's also about building out solidarity and campaigns on the ground that don't require people to have citizenship, that don't require people to vote as their primary way of changing things. Because voting as a primary way of changing things is easy to render useless when you change the system such that more and more Canadians come here and they'll never have the chance to vote. You know, if you look at the origins of Canadian citizenship and how in the earliest days, citizenship was pretty flexible. It was actually easy to have it suspended. It was easy enough to get it, but it only happened to be easy if you were from the British Isles. And most people from the British Isles were kind of given de facto Canadian citizenship when they came here. That all changed as Canada figured out how to run its own affairs. But the question of citizenship and borders has always been fluid in Canada, has always been flexible. I mean, from the earliest days of Canada's existence. And as borders have hardened around the world because of the flow of migrants escaping not just war, but also climate change, also fueled by countries like Canada, we've got to fight for something better because this is just so untenable and so inhumane.
Entirely. And I think let's keep all of that in mind as we enter an election season where people are going to be talking about immigration, temporary foreign workers, international students, work, the availability of housing. And they're going to be talking about it in a different way than Nora and I just spoke about it. We're going to be hearing a lot of folks talking about this in a way that ratchets up the racism and that relies on xenophobia and discrimination in order to pit people against each other in an us versus them zero-sum game. But as you just heard, these are issues that are the issues with work and the economy are impacting us across the board. Whether we are more exploitable because we've come here on a temporary foreign worker program, or whether we've been exploited through spending tens of thousands of dollars on a post-secondary education and not able to get that administrative assistant position that we've submitted 400 resumes for. It's, these are issues in which we can be brought together and realize that the issue isn't you or I against people who have been arbitrarily designated as different because they were born elsewhere by the happenstance that creates wherever we were born, but are actually being impacted by the folks who are literally asleep at the wheel, not planning this system, and are leaning into the exploitation where they can. And so for those of us who are paying attention, which should be all of us come this election season coming up, let's intervene in those types of discussions, because what's happening here is fucked up, and it's harming all of us, but it's not in such a way that we need to turn on each other.